everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Hope everyone is doing well. Feel free to share in the chat where you're tuning in from. Hey, Mel, welcome. Also, please share if this is your first time. We want to welcome our first timers.
Allison and Kelly, you didn't get the black top memo for our roundtable today?
I did not. Normally I am in black. It's like the one day I'm not. Laundry is a pain point in my household. I just hung up a sign in my laundry room that says, Alexa, do the laundry. I'm hoping it works, but I have a feeling it won't.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Hi, Leah. Welcome back.
Hello.
Good to see you. Welcome, Cherise, Sarah. But one more minute to allow everyone to join. This is, I believe, the first day of Hispanic Heritage Month, which is awesome. And we have our holding space for Latinas starting next Tuesday. So I encourage all of you to join it. All right, well, I know we have a lot to cover today, so we're going to get started. I'm Allison Matizik, the VP of Enterprise Sales here for Ellevate, and I'm joined with our co-host, Joanna Polgarin. I want to give a special shout out to our corporate partners, Bungie, Rollins, Desk, HEI Hotels, as well as to any of our chapter leaders. Welcome to first timers as well. So this is a safe, confidential space. We encourage participation with your video on if you feel comfortable. Also, one housekeeping item, it's a friendly reminder, we are offering 20% off our pro and executive access memberships with the code Pumpkin Spice. So please share that with your friends and colleagues. And today we're going to be talking about setting boundaries at work to protect your time and your sanity. I don't know how many of you are participating in a squad, but my squad just covered this in one of our hot topics last week, and it was really powerful. So I'm excited to learn more this afternoon. And we have Kelly Nolan, who's a time management strategist, who's our guest expert. And we're going to learn a new way to see your capacity and workload with more objective clarity, a new way to protect your personal plans from work, and options to how to say no, even when you can't give a firm literal no. No is a full sentence that we should use more, right? So with that, Kelly, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you for having me. I am thrilled to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Actually, before I do that, let me quickly drop a guide in the chat. It's not fully comprehensive, so definitely stick around, but it also, I'm going to throw a fair amount at you. So I want to make sure that everyone, you're not like scrambling and writing down notes. Okay. Let me share my desktop so that we can dig on in. And suddenly my thing disappeared. Hold on one second. Hold on, where'd you go? Well, thank you guys for being here. This is a topic, and while I look for it, I will pull this up, that I feel very near and dear to my heart, because when I was a practicing attorney, especially for those first couple of years, I felt incredibly overwhelmed and I knew I was underwater, but because I did not feel that I was objectively clear like that my overwhelm was objectively reasonable, I didn't say no, because I just was like, I don't know if it's okay if I say no. I'm not sure if I'm like fully, overwhelmed as like other people are. And therefore I'm going to keep saying yes. And slowly over time, I built out this weird calendar system that I use that helped give me a much more objective sense of my workload. And that's what I want to share with you today, because when you have an objective sense of your workload, you feel much more confident saying no. So we're talking about setting boundaries at work and protecting your time and your sanity. And our goals, as we talked about, are to build a realistic game plan to help you understand how you can get it all done over time and take breaks, which will help you see your workload more objectively so that you have confidence saying no. And then we really want to talk about firm ways that you can say no, even if you actually can't say no, given your position of who you're saying it to. So quickly, my name is Kelly Nolan. I was a patent litigator for 5 years in Boston and in California. And as I shared, boundaries were something I really struggled with. It's something that the people pleaser Minnesota person in me will never be fully comfortable with, but getting a lot more objective data of when I really do need to say no to still meet my past commitments, like my current commitments I've already made, gave me a lot more confidence of saying no, because I just knew it was objectively unreasonable to take something else on. And that's huge for those of you who've struggled with that in the past. So how we're going to get there is we're going to make your time visual in a trusted, simple system that will help you build out that game plan for how you're going to get everything done over time. And I just want to say, as a quick disclaimer, that this stuff is harder than we expect it to be. And I'm sharing that because when I struggled with time management, I would go to things and, someone would say like, just batch or just do this and make it sound easy. And then I'd go to implement and struggle and like, feel even worse about myself. And so I just want to share that as someone who's like been on that side and come to the other side too, that it's harder than we realize. I think time management is something we think we should be naturally good at. When we struggle with it, we feel a lot of shame. And I just want you to know that like no one ever really taught us how to do this, at least as an adult, like functioning human adult. And so please don't beat yourself up if you struggle with this as well. So I want you to think about, when we think about where our workload lives, all the tasks we have to do, focusing on the work front, I want you to quickly think about like, how are you keeping track of it all right now? A lot of times for events, a lot of us use digital calendars, like an Outlook calendar or G Suite calendar, something like that. But you might also use a paper calendar. Some people use whiteboards. Some people use an email inbox. Some people keep stuff in their heads. When it comes to the task stuff, the stuff that's not like with another person, typically that we need to do on our own time, we use to-do lists, Outlook calendar, email inbox, Post-it notes, your head, Microsoft Teams, a project management tool, like so many different places. And don't feel bad about this. Like a lot of people use 2 to 6 of these types of places to keep track of it all. We want to simplify that though, so that you have a single view of everything on your plate, so that you understand more objectively what your workload is. And this will empower you to draw boundaries with more confidence, because you know what is objectively possible and also what is not. And so when we're deciding the tool, we're deciding what tool to use to come up with that one more streamlined view, at least just when we're focusing on work, just one view. We want to use something that acknowledges that everything comes back to time. All of those things on all the Post-it notes, the to-do lists, in your calendar, in your head, in your email inbox, they all require your time and draw on your work hours. And so we need to use a tool designed to manage time, which is the good news is you're probably already using it, your calendar. And in this scenario, I want to talk about a digital calendar. Even if you are a paper lover, if you're a paper lover, reach out to me after this. If you just want to, if you're curious about why you might want to consider going digital, I just want to be clear, time management is so personal. And this is not a, like, everyone should do it my way by any means. But if you're interested in this, I could help you understand like what to weigh the pros and cons if you'd like. Okay. So, and of course my computer just froze. Hold on one second. Okay, so this is how many of us use our calendar right now. We usually put in events that work for us, but that involve other people. And there's a lot of white space, but we're pretty sure it's not free time. Like we're drawing from those to-do lists, the Post-it notes, and things like that. And what I want you to see is you can create a separate calendar. This is not just color coding, a separate calendar in your calendar that you can house your tasks in. So this is more of the stuff that you do unilaterally on your own. Things like researching, drafting responses, doing email, having lunch, all of those types of things and all the bite-sized steps that go into your projects or your cases or whatever your industry is can live in this separate sub-calendar. And the beauty of this is you start seeing more clearly, what am I planning to do with my day? How does it all fit together? And like, do I have time to do everything I want to do? Or is this going to need to go on to a separate day? The beautiful part about doing it in a separate sub-calendar is, one, not everybody sees it, but also you can click it on and off. So it's not just color coding where you're like, then you get lost in like, what's colors what and what's a hard event this week and what's not. You can click them on and off and filter what you see at any given time. Now, I just want to deal quickly with the objections for this. Some people are like, I don't like this. This is too busy. I don't like it. And I get it. Like, it is busier than how we normally use our calendars. But what I want you to see is that this is already how you're using your time. We're just making it visual. So instead of just having all this white space and your events, and your brain is the one pulling from the to-do list, the post-it notes, your head, all these things to kind of create a game plan and try and hold on to it. And then a curveball hits and you try and rearrange it and hold on to that new plan. You're getting it out of your head and make it visual. So the way I like to think of it as is your calendar might get more busy and cluttered coming out of this, but your brain is more free. And that's what's more important, because then it can go focus on what's important, whether that's at work or being present with your family. Also, there are some people who will preach like, put it in your calendar and live and die by your calendar. And like, I just want to be clear, like, I'm not one of those people. You don't need to do that. You can rearrange your plans just as you would in your head, but now you have the freedom of not having to hold on to that new plan and try and remember it all. And maybe you feel the guilt that it's not actually gonna, like, you should have done that thing. Will you have time to do it? When you can move it and see it and still get done in time, you actually have a lot more freedom to enjoy your new plan and just treat it like a neutral event and move forward. And just a reminder, there sounds like there's some like sound.
Kelly, I think you're on mute. Did it work? Oh.
There we go. I got muted with everyone. Hold on one second.
Sorry about that.
No, don't be. Happens all the time. Okay. And the last thing I just want to address is, like, if you have a lot of curveballs, like we all do, you can still use a system like this. It's a little outside of the scope, but I don't want you to say like, oh, I deal with 3 curveballs, I can't plan my day this perfectly. There are ways that we can acknowledge that and account for those using this system. The beautiful part of this is that we get realistic about what we can get done. We go to bed feeling accomplished about what we got done because it was realistic, which motivates us to get up to do it again tomorrow. We create a game plan for how we'll get it done over time. We can focus on what's in front of us because we know those other tasks have time protected to do them in the future. And we also can trust our downtime and relax, because if there's white space where you protect time for what you want to do, it's not like, oh, but what about those 5 other to-do lists I have? Maybe those are more important than trying to relax right now. Those things have time protected for them in the future that works. More important for today's conversation, though, is that you start seeing how it all interacts and get that objective view of your workload so that you know when you objectively cannot take on more, or what you can take on means that you have to move something more specific later, and you can have more specific conversations about your workload, empowered with the kind of objective evidence behind those discussions, instead of that feeling of like, I don't know, I'm overwhelmed, I need more support. You can be more clear on why, which we can talk more about. All right. So the action steps at this point, we're going to keep going, but I just want to be clear, and these are in the guide, is that you can create a new work task sub-calendar in your work account. On the guide, I included instructions of how to do that in Outlook and in Google. Check the permissions to make sure you're not sharing it with everybody or people you don't want to be. And then the lawyer in me is always like, never assume total privacy in a work account, but the average colleague shouldn't be able to see what you set up. And then use this calendar to plot out things like preparing for meetings, following up from meetings. That's like something I always forget to do, is like, I leave a meeting and I'm like, cool, on to the next thing. And like, it's really nice to have a reminder of like, hey, what did you say? Like, what action steps came out of that meeting that you need to do? Reminders to follow up with clients or teams on requests. So if you ask someone to get back to you on a certain date, putting a little reminder in your calendar, in that task sub-calendar of like, follow up if they haven't gotten back to you on this, can be huge in keeping the momentum going on a project. The bite-sized steps for actually knocking a project out of the park could go in there. Time to research certain issues, email processing time. That's something that, takes up hours of our day. But if we're not accounting for it in our plans, we're going to always have a losing game plan. Returning phone calls, especially if you hate doing them like I do, and kind of corral them. And then a weekly planning session. And in the guide, I have an article link on that to that if you'd like to learn more about that. So we want to talk now about leveraging this system to help you manage your workload and feel confident saying no. So when to say no? Obviously, I think we all, I don't want this to be the only times you say no. You can use your judgment if you're I really don't want to take on this project. I don't want to work for this person. That's an option. And we're going to keep going and talking about that. And you can apply the same stuff we're going to talk about. When I just want to kind of take a step back, when any new project or opportunity comes in, even one you are completely excited about, please practice your default answer being what an awesome project, whatever you want to say. Let me check my calendar before committing, and say that before committing. So it's very clear, you have not committed yet. Getting in that habit, even in your personal life, when someone's a social event, or they ask you to be on a committee at school, or whatever it might be, what a cool opportunity. Let me check my calendar before committing. This buys you breathing space to evaluate and kind of, even if you're going to say no, gear yourself up for saying no in a way you feel comfortable with and not in that flustered frame of mind. Then review your calendar. If you want, plot out tentative times that you think you'll need to give. So if you're I think this project will take me 4 hours a week, maybe protect, some blocks that add up to 5 hours a week, put them in your calendar, repeating forward, and just look at it. Does it work? What will have to change to allow that to happen? How do you feel about it? We've just seen it in your calendar. Sometimes you're I was excited about that, but I did not realize that's what this would mean. And really review it before you get back to someone. And then don't wait to say no until your plate is 100% full. More is coming between now and the completion of that project that you will have to take on. That's it's just personal life or other work things that come up on your current commitments. Don't wait to be okay, my plate is 100% full. Now I must say no. That doesn't account for that wiggle room that you need in your bandwidth. And also, we are notorious underestimators. If you struggle with knowing how long things take you, please know it's very, very common and the number one thing I see. So please don't feel bad about that, but acknowledge it. Maybe plan on saying something I'm going to start saying no around 70% or 80%, knowing that my bandwidth is likely more 90% full and more is coming. So it's just important to think about that I think some of us wait to say no until we're completely tapped out, and you just want to give yourself that breathing space. Also, to protect your personal plans, make sure that once a week you're going through your personal calendar and blocking off the time in your personal life, in your work calendar as well, if they don't talk to each other as well, which is a whole nother conversation. If you don't have to do this manually, great. But sometimes you really kind of do have to keep Outlook separate from where you manage your personal life. And you just want to make sure you're kind of having time once a week where you really bridge that gap and make sure that it works for both things and that you're blocking your work calendar to account for it. Do this in your primary calendar. Just to be clear, I know we talked about this separate sub calendar. I really want to make sure that you are blocking your availability in that primary calendar so people can't unilaterally get on your calendar in that time. And again, hold a planning session once a week to do this so that you don't feel the pressure to do this all the time. I really like kind of corralling this type of stuff. So you don't have to feel like your calendar has to perfectly reflect your day, because then you'll spend your day rearranging your calendar all the time. By kind of corralling this decision-making time, we free ourselves from that ability. How to say no is, in reality, no isn't always a complete sentence at work. I just think that, I wish it were, I wish it were, but in reality, if your boss emails you and is can you do this? You can't just respond and say no. And I don't want people to feel like they don't have a way to not say no. And so they don't. So they just keep saying yes. And let me back up. If you can say no and just stand behind that, more power to you. I just know the reality for a lot of people, particularly sadly women, is that the no kind of comes off pretty strongly. And we want to think about real ways that we can still say no. I'm not saying to say yes, but in a way that you're comfortable with, so you'll actually do it. So one example I love that someone taught me when I was practicing law is what an amazing opportunity. Based on my current commitments, I can turn to this in 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever it might be. I understand if you need to find someone else who can jump on this sooner. It's a really nice way to be the quote unquote team player, which I hate. I feel like that term is misused, but shows that you're willing to help, but also kind of has your boundary of, I can't turn to this for a while. If you need someone else to do it, great, and go for it. And so you can play with this. I'm not saying this is the only way you have this, but I think it's important to start thinking about what in reality, how are you going to say no, and have these in your back cards so you're not trying to scramble and figure it out when those moments come. Expect the pushback. This is something huge. I think we gear ourselves up to draw the boundary. We say the boundary, we're feeling good, and then we get pushback and like crumble because we didn't expect it. And it just like, I used to take it very personally. I kind of still do sometimes, but expecting it helps me prepare for it. So you don't have to necessarily explain your boundary in full and no, but it's always, always good to think about how you would defend it if push came to shove. I don't think this necessarily applies in our personal lives as much, but in the work life, it really can come up more. So I want to think about that. Be ready to explain like how long you think that project will take. Often people don't get it. They're like, I want you to do this. And you're like, no. And they're like, but it'll take you 5 minutes. And you're like, that will take me 20 hours. And so just be prepared to kind of think about that to explain how long something will take, what you've already committed to that you cannot move. And if necessary, offer to have a conversation with someone that you can escalate it to. So particularly if you're very junior, I think it's very great to at least have in your back pocket, like, I work mostly for this partner. If you want me to do it, we need to have a conversation with that partner so that you guys can decide what's the highest priority use of my time. Think about this as you draw the boundary because you sometimes don't have time to think about it when the pushback comes. Like you might send an email and then they might swing by your office. So it's really nice, again, not to over explain your boundary when you give it, but like jot 3 points down of why you can't take this on so you're ready if it comes. And then also think about how someone responds to your boundary is just good data for you to keep track of. I like this idea of we are not responsible for how our boundaries make people feel, but it's also a good data point for us to know in that I think boundaries work even when they don't. I have worked at a firm where I laid boundaries and it was awesome. And I have worked at a firm where I laid boundaries and it did not work. And that was good data for me to know. And it showed me when it was time to leave. And I think that that's really important is just, tuck it in your back pocket and keep track of it so that you can start making some decisions from there, even if the boundary isn't quote unquote working for you. All right, so we're going to dig into the breakout rooms now. I just want to throw out there again that it is okay if this stuff is hard for you. And if I can be a resource for you, I would love to be. And I'm really looking forward to these breakout discussions because I don't think there's one right way to do this, but I do think it's important to kind of take a beat and prepare ourselves for how are we going to approach these requests when they come in, knowing that we might get a little flustered and things like that, having these phrasings in our back pocket that we can pull from. So kind of just to reorient again, we want to create a system that gives us that objective view of our workload so that we know when to say no. And then we want to talk about practically, how do we do that? When do we do that? And what does that look like? So to kick us off, as we set up that foundation side of things, I think it's really important to think about not just what are the things on my to-do list that I want to put in my calendar, but what are some of the repetitive work activities in your life that you could block time off for in your day, especially those that come up on a repetitive basis. Because one mistake I often see with people time blocking is that they start just throwing their to-do list in there without acknowledging when is my energy high or low? When do I want to hold meetings? What about email and things like that? So I think it's just nice to brainstorm. What are the things that we kind of have to think about before to kind of build the container of time that we then have to give to our to-do list type stuff. And so I look forward to hearing this conversation with you guys, and then we'll come back and do the second one.
Thank you, Kelly. So many awesome nuggets here and strategies, which I know everyone is commenting about. We do have one question, maybe was addressed that a lot of individuals have a similar question, is the benefit of having the separate work tasks instead of just adding the plot points. I know you covered it a little bit, but if you can just maybe touch on it a bit more before we go into the breakout rooms.
Completely. It's a great question, particularly because it doesn't block your availability in your primary calendar. So some people are like, well, what do I do there? The reason that I love having a separate sub calendar, again, is so you can click it on and off. So when you're like, what are my meetings this week? What are the abnormalities in my week? You can easily get rid of the more repetitive stuff and see clearly what your week looks like from like an abnormal perspective. But I also like it from a sense you get immediate privacy in your calendar. It's a way to like put a lot in there without worrying that other people are going to see it. I know that in your primary calendar, you can block things as free or busy, or sorry, the level of detail that you want to share. But there's something different about being able to like build out a real game plan and not worry about hitting every event as like hide the details. It's also a nice way, I kind of blanked there for a second. The privacy and laying it all out. Those were the main ones. I'll come back if I remember the other one. But it's just really nice to be able to click it on and off and have that clarity around it. I also will add that you can build on this, which is partly where this comes from, to do this in your personal life with your personal repetitive tasks. You can see your partner's schedule and bring that in. You can see your kids' schedule and bring that in. So by having these separate calendars that you can click on and off and filter what you see at any given time, it's a great way to load up your calendar with all the time-related information, but then filter what you see at any given time so it's not quite so overwhelming when you're living your day-to-day life out.
Awesome.
Does that help answer? Okay.
Great. All right, we're going to go into the breakout rooms now. This is where the magic happens. Don't click leave meeting. We encourage, video on participation, and we'll probably see you back here in about 20 minutes or so. So have fun.
Before we jump in really quickly, sorry, Kelly, did you want us to focus just on the one question? Because we are going into breakouts just the one time.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So good question, because that probably won't be the full 20 minutes. The other questions that we can throw in the chat are, so once you kind of think about what are the invisible things that you want to throw in your calendar that will help you get a more objective view of your workload, is practicing some of the ways that you could say no. I think it's really nice to brainstorm with a lot of people because people have different preferences and risk tolerances and like how they want to come off. What are actual phrases that you could use to say no? Even let's say you don't like the one I threw out there, what are ways that you would feel more comfortable saying no? And maybe practice them, like literally practice them, because you're going to be pouring coffee in the kitchen, in like the office kitchen, and someone's going to come up and say something to you. And you kind of want to have that muscle memory of what you say in that. And then if you have time, and totally fine if you don't, think about how you want to respond to that pushback. Think about when you want to escalate a situation to maybe a boss who could weigh in. How would you do that? Do you want to have that conversation before you initially say no, whatever it might be? But again, it's just nice to think about these things. So the first question is like, what are those repetitive and visible work to-dos that you want to account for? How do you want to say no? Practicing that. And then also practicing how to respond to pushback if you'd like to get there.
Great. Thank you.